start. Let's make sure I can get to the right screen and make it work. So here we go. So we wanted to just start with a little bit of introductions about who we are and give you a background process for how to comment and how the hearing will work, and then explain the proposed rules and what the next steps are. My name is Katie Gauthier. I am with the Government Relations and Policy Unit, and I will serve as the rulemaking coordinator for this process. And with me today is Ian Johnson. Ian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Ian Johnson. I'm the Associate Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer. I'm the manager for the federal programs, including the National Register of Historic Places. And I'm the lead staff member in charge of working with Katie in the rule process.
So we wanted to start with what the process is for how the hearing is going to work. We know it's a new format for many of you, and then how commenting and a bit of the background on the rule. So for the hearing, today's hearing is to provide an opportunity for public comment. There, on the proposed rules, there won't be any decisions made at the hearing this afternoon. Each person will have 3 minutes to provide comments. OPRD staff won't be responding to questions at this hearing, but if you have questions as part of your testimony, I would ask that you state those questions as concerns for the record. However, if you do have questions about the rulemaking process, we can attempt to provide answers for those. And you can utilize the chat feature if you're participating via computer and ask questions via chat. If you are commenting on the rule, we ask that you not utilize the chat feature, and official comments need to be in email, writing, or on the website, and we'll provide information for that at the end of the meeting. The commenters will have an opportunity to go in the order that you've registered. We'll go through those who are on the computer first, and then anyone who called in second. And then we'll work through everyone who wishes to comment as we move through the process. We have a limit of 3 minutes. I will call your name, and then I'll enable your ability to speak. And you'll have to unmute yourself once I do that. And then once you start your comments, then I'll start a timer that you'll see on the screen that will count down the 3 minutes, and you'll hear a beep at the end of your 3-minute time. And we just ask that you to wrap up your comments at the end of the 3 minutes. When the meeting is being recorded, and this meeting will be posted on the website. So I think that covers kind of the logistics. If you do have a question that you don't want to type into the chat, you can use the raise your hand feature on Zoom. If you're doing it via computer, it is at the top of your screen. There's a hand raising feature. If you're on phone, you can dial *9 and that will raise your hand, and then we will try to call on anyone with your hand raised. So that goes through that process. Comments can be submitted online at our rulemaking website in writing or via email. We're accepting comments on the proposed rules through August 14th at 5 p.m. And we'll put this screen up at the end of the presentation as well, so that you can take that information down if you don't already have it. So now I'm going to turn it over to Ian to provide some background on the proposed rules, to give a little bit of information about how we got here. So Ian.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. For this presentation, I'm going to briefly describe what the National Register is, provide some background information on why the agency is pursuing a rule revision, and highlight some important sections. The presentation will take about 10 minutes. And so we'll just go ahead and start now with the presentation. It's a little formal. In fact, we're recording it, so it might seem a little strange for just a small group of people, but because it is recorded, we're going to go ahead and kind of walk through this in the way that we had planned. Encourage everyone who's on the call and who might be watching us through another means to encourage others to attend this a future public meeting. We've got one at 7 o'clock tonight and another one next Tuesday. So the National Register is the nation's official list of buildings, districts, structures, sites, and objects important to the nation's history. The program is a federal program run by the National Park Service and administered locally by the State Historic Preservation Office, which is part of Oregon Parks and Recreation. When a property is listed in the National Register, it's recognized as important to the nation's history. It's considered in the planning of federal or federally assisted projects, so like federally funded freeways or other similar projects. It's eligible for federal and state tax benefits and grants when those benefits are available. It's also eligible for local building code leniency, and that can vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Now, if you're an owner of a National Register property, you may choose, and that's important, you have to choose to take advantage of those federal and state tax benefits and grant programs I talked about. But if you do, those are subject to federal preservation standards administered by our office. Oregon state law does require local governments to review proposals at a public meeting to demolish or relocate properties listed in the National Register. Local governments may choose to allow or deny a demolition or relocation. Local governments also have the authority to impose additional restrictions on properties listed in the National Register following a public land use process. If you have any questions about how that happens, we would direct you to your local planning office. They may also, as a separate action from the National Register, list a property on their local landmark register. So a little bit about the National Register process for those who might be unfamiliar with it. The National Register process begins with an application that someone would turn into our office, a completed form. It's reviewed by staff who determine if it is or is not adequate. And if it's adequate, it's scheduled for a future review board meeting. There's a 9-member committee that reviews National Register nominations and makes a recommendation. Before that happens, the local community gets an opportunity. There's a public comment period that local community gets the opportunity to comment. And that information is brought forward to the review board, who makes a recommendation to our office, the State Historic Preservation Office. All that information and public comment is then collated and sent to the National Park Service that makes the final decision. Overall, if the process runs as it normally does, it takes about 9 months to a year, writing the nomination all the way to listing. The current rule that we're considering, the revised draft rule, it deals simply with that process, the National Register listing process. What is not in this rule is anything regarding what happens after a property is listed. So those benefits I talked about earlier or restrictions, those are all in different rules or state law or local law. What we're talking about today only has to deal with that process of listing a property in the National Register. So why are we doing a proposed rule? Next slide, Katie. So in the last 5 years, we've had several high-profile controversial efforts to nominate properties from different communities across the state. And it really highlighted problems with the way our office administered the program. What we noticed was gaps or conflicts between required federal laws and state processes and procedures, unclear or unaddressed administrative processes, such as how tribes or other local governments participate in the process, how we did public notice and participation, hearing procedures, and the process for keeping culturally sensitive information confidential. There was also a clear need to better define how to count property owners and objections to establish owner consent as required in the federal program. So the purpose of the new rule is to implement the Federal National Register of Historic Places so that the process is fair, clear, and transparent. It encourages participation, and it consistently applies the federal law. What we're calling the National Register rules actually has several different parts, and I'll highlight them quickly here. There's a statement referencing the applicable federal regulations and adopting those. There's definitions. There's a section that addresses the organization of the review board, which is actually called the State Advisory Committee on Historic Preservation. But for this presentation, I'll just refer to them as the review board. There's another section that has most of the pieces that folks might be interested in, which is the staff processes that describes in detail how a nomination goes from a proposal to listed in the National Register. There's a section that describes how the SACHP holds their meetings. And then there's a final section that lists and documents has a list of documents that are incorporated into the rule that we have for reference, and that's the last section. It also addresses when the rule becomes effective. So our first goal: fair, clear, and transparent. To that end, what we've focused on a few major provisions that were highlighted in those problematic cases I described before. One is providing a clear definition of owner, and that's in the definition section. I'll read real briefly that, the core definition, which is, quote, the owner of fee simple, absolute, or fee simple to feasible estate title to a property is shown in the property tax records of the county where the property is located. That definition, which is definition 16 of the definition section, has a lot of parts and details to it. And if you're interested in that, I'd encourage you not only to speak to it at this meeting, but also to read it closely. That definition does allow, under federal law, for a single property to have many owners, including they could be trusts or other entities. Even if those entities might be controlled by a single individual or small group of people. The new rule includes a clear process for how the SHPO creates the owner list, which is very important for determining owner consent. You need to know who the owners are to determine if the majority of owners do or do not object to the listing, which is a requirement of the federal law. There's a process for contesting the SHPO's counting of owners and objections, including provisions that require owners to provide evidence that they meet the definition of owner, and a provision that allows unresolved matters to be taken to a state administrative law judge to make a final ruling should that be necessary. It's also very detailed how nominations move through the process. For instance, the rule now defines what a substantive revision is, changes that would require the nomination basically to be reheard by the State Advisory Committee on Historic Preservation, the review committee. And using the federal criteria that's in the federal law, the rule now explicitly has that criteria listed. And so it's very clear what the decision criteria are for moving a nomination ahead at each stage, and what the review committee's actions can be, whether they recommend listing the property, recommend it with edits, deny or recommend denial of listing, or they simply put it off to another meeting, which is called a table. And again, the rule details under what circumstances each of those processes may happen. The new rule, or the revised rule, lays out processes for what happens when a nomination is returned from the National Park Service after submittal, should it not be listed. Park Service may return nominations for any number of reasons, and unfortunately, neither federal or state law or rule addressed what happened. And so the revised rule kind of fills in the margins on that. It does require, in this case, SHPO to determine what the next steps are and clearly communicate those. And it includes a provision to restart the process if a nomination document is returned to the SHPO and it's not listed within 2 years. Notably, for nomination documents that are currently in process before the rule takes effect, those would be exempt from that restart process. And that's something to note. And of course, there's an opportunity to appeal any SHPO decision. That was already provided for under federal law, but this revised rule explicitly states that as well. The second goal is to encourage participation. There's a very clearly defined public comment period. It borrows on the federal comment period, which is to begin not more than 75 days before the review board hearing and not less than 30. It requires our office to provide written notice to the proponent, owner, local government, chief elected official, so the mayor or county commissioners, and all 9 of Oregon's federally recognized tribes. It allows our office to coordinate with local government on the format, content, and distribution of the public comment period notice, and it allows the SHPO to take additional steps to notify owners should that be necessary. The roles of proponents, owners, elected officials, local landmarks commissions, and tribes are well defined, as well as how they can participate in the process. The revised rule very explicitly states that anyone can comment, so that it's not a closed box, and allows for comments to be submitted in writing and as well before the review board at their meetings. And there's also an opportunity for state agencies and local government to comment on nomination proposals as well. And the third goal is to consistently apply the federal program. So everything I talked about prior, of course, is really couched in what the federal requirements are for this program. And we've paid close attention to that, even as we've tried to make it more explicit and kind of fill in the gaps between some of the things that we need here in Oregon and some of the things that were not specifically addressed in the federal rule. I think it's worth noting that a lot of the federal evaluation criteria for determining if a property is or is not eligible for listing National Register is integrated throughout the document. And so both in staff procedures and in the procedures that the review board uses to make their recommendation. The rule also briefly addresses when all or part of a National Register nomination document can be kept from public disclosure or confidential. It does not define a specific process. It leaves that up to staff to develop as an office procedure. It also clearly defines the process under which a local jurisdiction, a city or county, can object to a nomination and halt the nomination process. So that is the conclusion of my presentation. It's a very long rule with a lot of parts, and I would encourage folks to look at it closely. We're very much interested in the public feedback on this to make this a better rule. So, Katie, back to you.
Great, thank you, Ian. So we also wanted to just give you a heads up about what the next steps are once the public comment period has ended. So after 5 p.m. on August 14th, comments will be compiled and then shared with the Oregon State Parks and Recreation Commission. A staff report will go to the commission with recommendations on revisions to the proposed rules. The commission will then have the opportunity to review comments and the staff report. And from there, they have the option to vote to adopt the rule changes as proposed. They can make amendments based on the comments that were received. They can seek an additional comment period on changes to the rules, or they can choose not to move forward with the rules at this time, or proposed rules change at this time. So that's the process moving forward. That concludes the presentation portion. We did want to just give you another look at the process for our hearing. So we have the official public hearing portion where we take your testimony. You can also choose to provide the testimony in writing, but this is the opportunity to provide any comments you might have verbally. So right now, the only person that I have signed up is Marvin. Before we start the official public hearing comment portion, I have a script that I need to read, and then I will call Marvin and then open it up to anybody else who is on that would like to comment. So I'm going to read the script first, and you can all think about if there's something that you would like to put on the record. This hearing is now in session. It is being recorded to maintain a permanent record. My name is Katie Gauthier, and I'm the hearings officer. Today is July 23rd, 2020, and the time is 2:23 p.m. The purpose of the hearing is to provide an opportunity for public comment on the proposed rule change to OAR 736-050-0220 to 736-050-0270 by the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department regarding the National Register program. The agency invites comments about whether other options should be considered for achieving the rule's goals while reducing the negative impacts on business. In addition to presenting oral comments at this hearing, anyone may submit written comments until 5 p.m. on August 14th, which is the close of the public comment period. Comments received after the close of the public comment period will not be reviewed or considered by the agency unless the agency decides to extend the public comment period for everyone. Send comments to the public comment mailbox or the State Parks office. Those addresses are posted on the PowerPoint slide at the end of on the screen. OPRD will not respond to questions during this hearing. After the close of the public comment period, staff will prepare a report to the agency, which will be available from the agency upon request and will be presented to the Parks Commission as they consider adoption of these rules. If you have questions as part of your testimony, I would appreciate if you could state those questions as concerns for the record. Please do not ask questions of those who are making formal comments. To to provide better context for comments, I may ask follow-up questions. To respect each speaker, anyone not presented has been muted. I ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. Again, you may submit written comments up until the close of the public comment period. The chat feature can be utilized for process questions, but we ask that any formal public comment be submitted in writing via mail, email, or online. When it is your turn to comment, you will be allowed to speak and a timer will appear on the screen. So the first person who's going to speak have an opportunity to speak is Marv. Marv, did you want to provide testimony?
I'll just tell you who I am. I'm Marv Sanis. I own and maintain a National Registry property. And I also wrote the successful nomination in 1991. This is the old West Salem City Hall at 1320 Edgewater Northwest in Salem. And I just like to keep up on what you guys are doing. I will make the comment that a lot of people question nominations of the National Registry. On balance, it has helped us. We have 11 tenants, and we've got 3 tenants that have been in that building for almost 30 years. And on balance, this has been an advantage for me and the family of tenants that are in that building. So thanks for being here. That's it for me.
Great, thank you very much. I'm sorry, was there anyone else that wanted to comment? I'm gonna stop the screen share, it got messed up. If there is anyone else that would like to comment, if you would raise your hand, then I will unmute you.
Well, Katie, it doesn't sound like we have any takers.
Beth, I see that you're unmuted. Were you wanting to comment? Oh, I have to allow you to talk.
I'm still showing her as
Okay.
muted on my screen.
Beth, did you want to comment?
No.
Okay, great, thank you. I just didn't want to have anyone not have the opportunity. Well, I'm gonna pull this screen back up here. It seemed like we had some issues with that piece, but so you should all still be able to see this. I apologize. Can you see the?
Katie, I can see your screen in the presentation, but it's
Okay.
in the design mode versus the presentation mode.
Okay.
That's what I'm seeing on my side.
Yeah. Well, let's see.
There you go. It's on the presentation mode now.
Okay, there we go. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We would encourage you to please submit comments as you've learned more about the proposed rules. Again, the comment period is open through August 14th. We have 2 more public hearings currently scheduled, one for 7 p.m. tonight, and then one for 7 p.m. on Tuesday, August 20, Ian, help me, 27th?
Yeah, let me look at my calendar here real quick.
I don't want to say the wrong date.
That would be Tuesday the 28th.
Tuesday, August 28th. So you can either
July 28th.
July 28th, yes. Tuesday, July 28th, or this evening at 7 p.m. If you would like to participate in another hearing, or please provide comments by August 14th. So thank you very much for participating, and we appreciate. Oh, it looks like we do have one hand. Patty, did you want to
I
provide
just
comments?
had a question.
Okay.
You know, should we have questions about the rules? What process are we going to have those answered? Because there are rules that are made with no reasoning behind the rules or the purpose of the rules.
If you look on the website, there's information from the Rule Advisory Committee, and you can review their deliberation, and that may answer some of your questions.
Those deliberations are almost impossible to hear. I've listened to I've painfully tried to listen to the first two. You can't hear them, and I would like to hear from SHPO what the reasoning is behind, you know, certain rules that they are implementing, rather than just listen to very difficult to hear tapes, because there's also no, if there were minutes in print, then at least I could read it, but I can't hear that.
You can submit your questions to the public comment in writing via online writing or email, and those will be addressed as part of the rulemaking process in the brief to the commission.
Right, but those being addressed do not give me the information I need in order to make a decision about the rules. I mean, other than just saying that the rule committee, a few people from the rule committee went in this direction to establish this rule, that doesn't really tell me, you know, anything about, you know, why this rule was considered to be important or necessary, or what the precedence was to have this rule be necessary.
There's also, Ian, do you want to talk about the brief that in the presentation to the commission?
Sure. I mean, and the piece of information that might be useful is the rule brief that I wrote for the commission when they opened rulemaking at their June meeting. And you can find that by going to the OPRD commission page. And if everyone will bear with me just for a moment, what I can do is figure out what that page is.
Was that the cover page by Chrissy Curran that went with the rules for
No,
the
it's a
June
different
17th?
document.
Pardon?
It's a different document.
Okay.
We will also put a link to that on the rulemaking website so that you don't have to.
I'm a little frustrated with this process in that I feel like it's an opportunity for all of us to actually give you our input on the rules and send written notice, but it's hard to not get back any other information for a process that we weren't involved in.
So what I would encourage everyone to do is to look at, you can look at the rule report, but to comment on the face of the rule of the rule. If the content does not make sense, simply say the content does make sense. If it does not seem relevant, say that it does not seem relevant, or whatever the comment may be. We will be responding, looking at all the comments in mass. We're going to be run 3 of these. We've received some comments through our email account. We received some additional comments from the Rule Advisory Committee, and we'll be looking at those. We may be responding to some or all individually in a single document, or we may respond to them if there's some clear themes or a number of similar questions. But that'll all be provided to the commission. That goes up on the commission's website. And then the commission will have a public meeting where folks will be able to testify and weigh in and have a discussion with the commission on that before they would consider adoption. So I did find the web page for that. And if you just type in Oregon Parks and Recreation Committee, and it's the Commissions and Advisory Committees page, and it's at their June meeting, and it's item 9A. And Katie said we'll get a link up on that, so that might be the best way than to trying to dive through Google. I have the advantage of knowing exactly where I'm looking. But that particular report, it runs a total of 24 pages, and it includes the draft rule as it existed at that time. I would encourage you to ignore that because the draft rule that went out to for public comment included some typographical edits and some other things. But it does include a 2-page memo that gives a general background for this particular process, highlights what the discussion was from the RAC, and it includes a couple of comments that were submitted by members of the Rule Advisory Committee as an appendice. And so I think that'll be informative.
Do you have a date yet for the commission meeting?
A lot of it is going to depend on how this process goes here. If we do end the public comment period as planned on August 14th, the goal is to get to the, it would be the November commission meeting. But a lot of that depends on the volume and type of comments we receive. If we receive a lot of comments that will require time to address and think through, then that timeline may be pushed, but that's where we're sitting at right now. And as Katie mentioned earlier in her presentation, we do have the option to extend the public comment period should that be necessary.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all for participating. And we will get a link to the commission meeting that Ian referenced onto the rulemaking site. And with that, I think we will end this public hearing, but we will be back again at 7 p.m. this evening.
Thank you all for attending. Certainly appreciate it. And please let your friends and neighbors know that this is happening.